The fireplace crackled behind me, but I felt nothing. "Hi, I'm Evelyn, 34. I flew home because my parents said it was urgent, and all I heard was this. The mansion goes to Camille, the investments to Jason, the boat to Douglas, and Evelyn gets a rusty old truck." I sat there in that cedar-scented study while my own family looked right through me. They thought that was the end of it. They have no idea what that truck really carried. Have you ever been cut out of your own family like this? Tell me in the comments. I stood there in the wood-paneled study that used to smell like Christmas, the same room where I learned to read by the fireplace. Now, it smelled like finality, like every good memory had been boarded up and locked away. Camille sat with her legs crossed, smiling like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. Jason leaned back in his designer blazer, arms folded like a king at the table. And me? I hadn't even taken off my jacket. I came straight from the airport because Mom's email said, "Come home, urgent family matter." Urgent? This was it. The lawyer's hands shook as he read, "The Vermont estate, the lakefront house in Maine, all properties to Camille Walsh. The investments, stocks, and company holdings to Jason Walsh. Marine assets to Douglas Walsh. And to Evelyn Walsh, the 1982 Dodge truck parked in the barn." There was silence. Then Jason laughed, low and smug. "Guess Grandpa wanted you to drive off quietly." I didn't even sit down. I said, "I'll take the truck," and I left. Nobody stopped me. Not my dad, not my mom. They couldn't even look me in the eye. Outside, I walked to that barn through the cold September air. And that truck, they thought it was a joke. Rust, a broken mirror, a dead engine. My hands shook as I opened the door, the smell of oil and dust rushing out like ghosts of a life that once felt safe. Inside the glove box, there was an envelope with my name on it. Inside, a photo of me at 8 years old and a USB drive. The weight of that tiny piece of metal in my hand felt heavier than the whole mansion I just lost. That USB? It's proof. Proof that the will they paraded today was forged. Proof that they built their new empire on lies. They thought they'd buried me. But I've spent years in places where betrayal can kill you. I know how to fight a war. And this time, the war is at home. Have you ever been betrayed by your own family like that? Tell me in the comments, would you walk away? Or would you do what I did next? This story isn't about money. It's about truth. And what happens when the forgotten daughter fights back? I didn't sleep that night. The walls of the tiny cabin felt like they were closing in, the hum of the old heater sounding louder with every passing hour. I sat there staring at the USB drive on the table like it was some kind of live grenade. But before that moment, before the drive, there had already been years of small betrayals, each one cutting a piece out of me until there was almost nothing left. I remember when it started. Even after I left home at 18, I sent money back. At first, just $500 a month, then $1,200. And by the time I was working overseas, it became $2,500 every single month. 3 years. 36 months, almost $90,000. Just until the house is paid off, Mom said in her emails. "Your sister needs help with her tuition," she said. "Your brother's business is struggling, and you know how much he looks up to you," she said. I believed her. I believed every single word, because that's what you do when you think blood means loyalty. What I didn't know was that while I was wiring my savings into that family, they were taking vacations I wasn't invited to, buying new furniture for a house I never got to visit, and holding birthdays and anniversaries without even sending me a text. I told myself they were just busy. I told myself that being away meant I didn't belong. But deep down, I think I knew. I just didn't want to look at it too closely. I came home for Dad's 60th birthday once. I showed up with a gift, custom fishing rods engraved with his initials. And when I walked in, the party was already over. They'd had the cake, the photos, the whole family dinner. 2 days earlier. Mom looked at me with a guilty smile. "Oh, honey, we didn't think you could make it, so we moved it up. You understand, right?" I nodded. I always nodded. And Camille, standing behind her with a glass of wine in hand, said, "Don't worry, I'll send you some pictures later." She never did. So I went back overseas. I threw myself into work because there at least I knew what my worth was. Over there, they didn't care who your family was. They cared if you got the job done. But even on the other side of the world, they still found ways to reach me. Another email. "Jason's in trouble. He needs $10,000 fast. It's an emergency." And I sent it. A year later, "The roof's leaking. If we can't fix it, the whole house will be ruined." Another $15,000. I told myself I was saving the house, saving something of home. But the truth? I was just feeding a machine that was already planning how to cut me out. The day I got that cold 12-word email, "Come home, urgent family matter," I felt something I hadn't felt in years, hope. I thought maybe this was finally about coming together. Maybe Dad was sick. Maybe they just needed me to be there. I didn't know it was a summons to watch them steal from me to my face. The moment I walked into that room, I knew. The study looked polished, but the air was heavy. Not one of them smiled at me. Jason's eyes slid past me like I wasn't even a person. Camille's lipstick looked like armor. And Mom, she couldn't stop rubbing her sleeve, like maybe if she rubbed hard enough, she could erase what she was about to do. "Sit," the lawyer said. I stayed standing. Then he read those words. Every asset, every property, every dollar, all of it went to them. And for me, just that truck. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears, but I didn't give them the satisfaction of a tear. Jason laughed, and the sound will stay with me forever. It was a sound that said, "You lost. You don't belong here." "Guess Grandpa wanted you to drive off quietly," he said. I didn't even look at him. I said, "I'll take the truck." And I left. I didn't cry until I was out by the barn. The truck was worse than I remembered. Rust blooming like cancer, tires flat. And still, I put my hand on the cold, dented hood like it was something alive, something that might remember me. Inside, it smelled like oil and tobacco and faint citrus, my grandpa's scent. I pulled the glove box and found the envelope. 4 words on it, written in his sharp handwriting, "Not for them." I opened it slowly. The photo fell out first. Me, 8 years old, smiling with a missing tooth, holding a trout while Grandpa had his hand on my shoulder. Behind it, taped carefully, a small silver USB drive. I sat there in that dead truck for a long time, holding it. And for the first time that day, I felt something besides pain. I felt purpose. That night, back at the cabin, I plugged the USB into my laptop. 3 files. And as soon as I opened the first one, I knew Grandpa hadn't left me a truck. He'd left me a map. The files were full of numbers, names, accounts, transfers that spelled out something ugly, money siphoned into companies I'd never heard of, and initials that made my stomach drop. CW, Camille Walsh. I closed the laptop fast when the floorboard behind me creaked. She was standing there in my cabin, like a ghost dressed in an ivory coat. "I brought wine," she said. I stared at her. "I don't drink, not with family." She smiled. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You look surprised today." "You ever seen me surprised, Camille?" Her smile faltered for just a second. Then she glanced at my laptop and said, "Let's catch up soon," before walking back out into the cold. The second she was gone, I encrypted everything and sent a copy to someone I trusted. Because if I'd learned anything by now, it was this. If they're willing to erase you, they're willing to bury you. And I was done being buried. The next evening, I went back to that house. Not for reconciliation, for dinner. Camille called it a family meal, but I knew what it was. A celebration. A victory lap. The dining room hadn't changed since we were kids. That long mahogany table, the chandelier, the portrait of Grandpa watching over everything. The only difference was me. I wasn't that kid anymore. Camille raised her glass first. "To new beginnings," she purred. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were glass. And every single one of them, Mom, Dad, Jason, Douglas, pretended I wasn't there. I stared down at my plate. I thought of every transfer I'd made, every single month where I ate cheap canned food overseas so they could keep their perfect, polished lives. "Good to have you back, Evelyn," Camille said, "even if only temporarily." I didn't lift my glass. "I'm not sure it counts as a beginning," I said, "when everything's already been divided." The smile on her face faltered for a split second. Then she laughed, loud and fake. Jason followed, like a trained echo. Jason leaned forward, sloshing wine in his glass. "I heard you just stare at computers these days. What happened to all that kick-down-doors hero stuff? Didn't age well?" I didn't look at him. Staring at computers is safer, keeps me out of family dinners. Douglas didn't laugh. He just said, "Some of us stayed and earned our place." That one hit deeper than I wanted to admit. I swallowed it down, like I always did. And Mom? She just kept cutting her salmon into perfect squares, silent, like if she didn't speak, she wouldn't have to choose a side. I watched them. I memorized every movement, every smug smirk, every careless tilt of their heads. And finally, I said it. "No, Grandpa didn't change the will, you did." The air in that room froze solid. Jason's eyes darted to Camille. Douglas's jaw tightened. And for the first time that night, Mom looked up from her plate. Her hand trembled just a little. Camille tilted her head. Her voice was low, silky. "Do you have proof of that?" I smiled, but I didn't answer. That silence? It was enough. It told her I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't leave that house angry. I left cold, colder than I'd ever been. Because that was the night I understood something. You can't save a family that never wanted you. And you can't beat a game by playing fair when the rules are already rigged. The next storm that came through Vermont, I used it as cover. While thunder shook the hills, I went back to the estate. Not the house, the office. I'd memorized her iPad unlock pattern at dinner. Camille always made a show of things, even security. I slipped into the office, gloved hands careful on every door. The iPad was right there on the desk. It took less than a minute to open. Invoices, drafts, and then, in a folder marked private, a file called Probate Draft Alt, and another, Trust Allocation Tier 2, both modified 2 days before Grandpa died, both by Camille. Then I opened the audio folder, and there it was. George Tierney, the same lawyer who'd been sweating bullets while reading the will, his voice recorded and desperate. "Camille, I don't feel good about this. If Douglas knew, hell, if she knew, this is illegal. We shouldn't be reprinting anything. I'm out." I copied everything, sent it off to Max, the one person I trusted to bury a trail deeper than anyone in this family could dig. I didn't stop to feel anything. Not rage, not grief, just cold focus. And that was how it really started. From that moment, every single memory of what they did to me came back like a tidal wave. Being 12, standing on that porch in the rain, holding a broken fishing rod while Jason cried crocodile tears and blamed me. No one believed me. Not Mom. Not Dad. No one but Grandpa. He'd knelt down, wiped the mud off my face, and whispered, "Sometimes, kiddo, the only one who knows the truth is you. That's when it matters most to hold on to it." I held on to it then, and I was holding on to it now. They didn't just take a house from me. They took every good memory I had of what home was supposed to be. And after all those years of funding them, of protecting them, of showing up even when they never showed up for me, they still looked me in the eye and told me I was worth nothing more than an old truck. That's why this time, I didn't fight for their love. I fought for something else, for the truth. That night, I opened my laptop one last time. The USB drive sat in the port like a sleeping snake, and I started to write. I wrote down every dollar I'd ever sent, every email, every name. And at the bottom, in all caps, I wrote one line: "I am done being silent." The storm didn't stop after that night. It just moved inside me. I started keeping 2 lives. By day, I was the quiet daughter who'd come back home and disappeared into the woods. By night, I was building a case, piece by piece, like I was back on an operation, except this time, the battlefield was my family's empire. Max was my first call. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm, dry, like he'd been waiting. "I need everything," I told him. "Metadata, hidden files, cloud backups, anything you can scrape." "Who are we going after?" he asked. "My family," I said. And I hated that I didn't even have to explain. The days that followed looked normal from the outside. I stayed in that little cabin, my truck parked out front like it was the only thing I owned. I went into town just enough for groceries so no one would ask questions. I kept my coat hung by the door, my laptop on the table, and my back to the wall. But behind those closed doors, every single hour was a war. Max sent the first batch of files 2 days later, encrypted folders with names that felt like ghosts. Cypress Holdings, Sea Trust Legacy. When I opened them, the screen filled with a spider web of bank accounts, shell companies, fake invoices, and in almost every corner of that web was Camille's signature. Some nights, the weight of it all almost got to me. I'd sit in that chair with my laptop light flickering across my face and hear my grandfather's voice in my head, telling me to stay sharp. Then I'd see Jason smirk, and the sting of Mom not even looking at me, and it all came back like fuel. Every click, every decrypted file, every new thread I pulled made me calmer, colder. There was one moment I won't forget. It was just after 3 a.m. when I found the audio file. It started with paper shuffling, then his voice. My grandfather's voice. "This is not what I signed. I won't change it now. I don't care what she promised you." And then it cut. Abrupt. Like someone had sliced the truth in half. I hit rewind. I listened again. Same break. It felt like a hand on my shoulder. A message from him, even from the grave. "Don't let them bury me." Max's next email came with a subject line that said only, "This goes federal." Attached were trails of transfers, starting small, then ballooning into millions. Through Dubai, through Cyprus, through a dozen names that didn't exist until Camille and Jason built them. It wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was fraud. It was federal, and that changed everything. The hardest part wasn't the files. It was the waiting. I knew I couldn't strike yet. Not until I had more than enough proof. Not until there was no way for them to wriggle free. So I played the part. I showed up at the next dinner when Camille invited me. I wore plain black, no makeup, nothing sharp, and I sat there while they smiled like predators. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just watched. Watched the way Jason couldn't stop checking his phone. Watched the way Camille's hand hovered over her iPad like it was her lifeline. Watched Douglas, quiet and tense, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And I waited. After that dinner, I made a plan. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to let them paint me as angry or unstable. No. I was going to build something they couldn't burn down. The next step was Linda Fletcher. She used to work with Tierney, the family lawyer. But a year ago, she disappeared, quit her job, moved north, went silent. Max found her. A little house an hour away, paint peeling off the porch, a mailbox leaning sideways. I drove there in the rain, the road slick and quiet, the truck's wipers dragging slow across the glass. She opened the door just a crack. "Whatever you need," she said, "you can call the church office. I don't do walk-ins." "I'm not here about taxes," I told her. She narrowed her eyes. "Then who are you?" I held up my phone and hit play. George Tierney's voice spilled out through the speaker, that same panicked tone I'd heard before. "Camille, I don't feel good about this. We shouldn't be reprinting anything. I'm out." I watched her expression change, irritation to guilt to fear. "You need to leave," she whispered. "Now." I didn't move. "You've been carrying this alone for too long. Tell me the truth." The silence stretched so long I could hear the rain dripping from the roof. And then slowly she opened the door. Inside Linda's house, everything was small, dim. Stacks of papers covered every surface. Old teacups, a yellow lamp buzzing softly in the corner. She gestured for me to sit, but didn't sit herself. Her hands shook as she rubbed at a coffee stain on the table, like she could erase what she'd done. "My mother's sick," she said. "That's why I left the firm. I didn't come here to ruin you," I said quietly. "I came here because they ruined me." Her eyes flicked up, searching my face for a lie. It took her a long time to speak. When she did, the words came out like stones she'd been carrying for years. "Camille said it was just a draft," she whispered. "She told me to retype it so it would be cleaner. She gave me a list of changes, new beneficiaries, new allocations. She promised me it was just for internal review, said your grandfather wanted it simplified." "And Tierney?" I asked. "He told her no," Linda said. "He said it was illegal, so she froze him out. That's why he looked so nervous at the reading. He knew what we'd done." She opened a drawer, pulled out an envelope that had been hidden under stacks of tax forms. "This," she said, sliding it across the table, "is the original will, time-stamped, signed, untouched. George gave it to me the day after your grandfather died. He told me to keep it safe." I picked it up with both hands, my fingers trembling. Inside was a USB drive, no label. The truth, sitting right there on that table. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not come forward before?" She shook her head. "Because Camille promised me silence in exchange for security. She paid my rent for 6 months, and I told myself that was survival. But really..." She looked down at her hands. "I've been hiding." I stood. "You don't have to hide anymore." I slid the envelope into my coat pocket and left, the drizzle soaking into my shoulders. By the time I reached the truck, my phone buzzed. "Max, got something?" he asked. "Better than something," I said. "A witness, and the real will." Back in the cabin, I spread everything out across the table like pieces of a puzzle. Emails, financial records, the signed document, the USB. For hours, Max and I worked in silence, two ghosts on opposite ends of a call, turning their lies into a map. "This is bigger than an inheritance," Max said finally. "This is fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. If we get the timing right, we can freeze everything." I wasn't thinking about money anymore. I was thinking about that dining room, about the way Jason smirked and Camille raised her glass like they were untouchable, about the way Mom couldn't look at me. No more. The next morning, I drove into Burlington to meet Marissa, a federal attorney Max trusted. She had sharp eyes, the kind of woman who looked like she'd cut through steel if she had to. This timestamp is gold, she said after scanning the files. Linda's system logged the original will 2 weeks before your grandfather died. The edited version? 5 days after. That's substitution. And these offshore accounts? This isn't just estate fraud, it's federal. She started typing, fast, building something on the screen that looked like a declaration and a weapon all at once. I stood at the window watching the Vermont sky hang low and gray. This won't be a fight I can win with shouting, I said. No, she said. This is a fight you win with evidence. That night, I mailed a copy of everything, unsigned, no return address, to Camille's office. Let her know the ground was shifting. Let her feel the way I felt that day in the study, powerless. I didn't sleep. I just waited. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. 4 words. Cold. Sharp. What the hell did you just do? I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because now, for the first time in my life, they were the ones afraid. For weeks, I stayed quiet. I went running by the lake. I sat in that cabin, decoding more files, watching the walls of their empire start to crack. The IRS flagged their accounts. The first subpoenas went out. Max dug up every hidden message, every deleted memo Camille thought she'd buried. And I watched, silent, focused. Because this was my war now, not a loud one, not with guns, but one that would end the same way, with them on the ground, staring up, realizing they'd underestimated me. When the first federal freeze hit, I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the table with the USB drive, and let the sound of their world falling apart fill the silence. It started with the sound of my name on the evening news. I had been sitting on the cabin floor, papers and photos spread out like a battlefield map, when the anchor said it. Ex-operative Evelyn Walsh files petition to freeze family estate. They didn't even bother calling to warn me. They went public. And within an hour, Camille struck back. The first headline was almost neutral. Ex-soldier challenges family will, alleges fraud. The second one wasn't. Evelyn Walsh, dangerous, unstable, suffers from PTSD, sources say. The image was one I hadn't seen in years. Me crouched behind an armored truck, sand in my hair, my face sharp and unyielding. But the caption made sure everyone saw it through Camille's lens. She has always struggled with reintegration, Camille had said in a clean blue suit behind a podium. This is heartbreaking for us, but we have to honor our grandfather's wishes, even when others are confused by them. Jason's voice followed in a pre-recorded statement. I respect my sister's service, but PTSD can warp memory. That's not her fault, but it's not a legal argument either. I sat there, laptop screen flickering across my hands, and read every single word. They didn't just want to cut me out. They wanted to erase me, turn me into someone no court would trust. The phone rang. Marissa's voice was sharp. They're going after your credibility. We need a counter-statement. No, I said. They want me loud. They want me angry. I'll give them silence. Let them hang themselves. This isn't just unethical, she said. It's dangerous. I've been called worse than dangerous, I told her, and I survived all of it. The next morning, I found out just how far they were willing to go. I'd been digging through Max's latest data poll when my laptop lit up with a recovered voicemail. George Tierney's voice again, this time different, frantic. If anything happens to me, tell Linda the real is in drawer C. 2 days later in court, that warning became a prophecy. The room was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, their cameras pointed at me like rifles. Marissa had warned me the morning would be procedural, lay the foundation, authenticate the files. But when the clerk called the first witness, the seat stayed empty. Miss Fletcher, the judge said, looking over his glasses. Not present? She confirmed yesterday, Marissa said, rising. We request a continuance to secure her deposition. We believe the witness was intimidated. Camille's lawyer smirked. No proof of that, Your Honor. She likely realized this entire motion is built on speculation. The judge's gavel hit once. Enough. We'll resume after lunch. Without testimony, your case is on thin ice. I stepped down from the witness stand and felt the weight of every stare on my back. And then I saw her, my mother, sitting behind Camille, her hand resting lightly on Jason's arm. She didn't look at me, not once. By the time I got back to the cabin, the silence in my chest had turned into something harder. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just sat there, staring at the envelope Grandpa had left me, the photo of us fishing taped to the back of the glove box. Sometimes, he'd told me once, the only one who knows the truth is you. That's when it matters most to hold on to it. The knock on the cabin door came just after 7. I reached for the handle of my holster out of instinct. Then I saw it, an envelope sliding under the door. I opened it. "Evelyn, they found me. I'm scared, but I'll do it, I promise. L." The next day, my phone buzzed before dawn. "Max." "Ready?" he said. "Ready," I told him. We froze everything. When you freeze an account, you freeze a life. By noon, the bank servers had locked out every single login tied to the Walsh Trust. Camille's firm email bounced back with access denied. Jason's corporate card was declined at a downtown steakhouse. I could almost see his face when the waiter told him. Marissa called from the courthouse steps. "The DOJ has accepted the motion. Financial Crimes Division is involved now." "They'll fight," I said. "They can try," she answered. That night, Max sent me a new file. Linda had recorded a full video deposition, her voice steady this time, no shaking hands. She told the camera everything. How Camille gave her the list of changes, how Tierney tried to stop it, how she kept the original will, waiting for the day someone would need it. At the end, she held up the USB George had left with her. "This," she said, "is the truth." The next morning, the courthouse was full again. I sat at the front, Marissa beside me, while the judge watched Linda's video play across the screen. You could hear a pin drop when she said the final words. The original will give Evelyn an equal share. That was Fred's intention. The judge's gavel came down. Until final review, asset transfers related to the probated will are suspended. The original testament will be used provisionally. Camille didn't look at me when it was over. Jason did, though, and for the first time, he didn't look smug. He looked scared. But Camille wasn't done. An hour later, she delivered her final card, a codicil. 3 days before Grandpa's death, she claimed, he'd signed an amendment revoking my share. I looked at the signature and knew immediately it wasn't real. We pulled the hospital records. On the date that codicil was signed, Grandpa was in a morphine coma, non-responsive, unable to hold a pen. And Tierney? He was in New Hampshire. The judge called an emergency hearing. Marissa handed over the ICU photos, the sedation chart, the GPS logs. Camille's lawyer tried to object, but the judge cut him off. "If this document is forged, we escalate to criminal fraud." Forensic experts confirmed it a week later. The codicil was fake. Both signatures forged. And with that, their final weapon fell apart. The next blow came from the IRS. 3 accounts frozen. 2 consultancy firms exposed. Dozens of emails recovered, each one a nail in their coffin. Douglas resigned from every board position. Jason's name landed on 2 compliance lists, and Camille, her law license was suspended pending investigation. The night that news broke, Marissa handed me a glass of scotch and said, "They're unraveling. You've already won." But it didn't feel like winning. It just felt like the ground had finally stopped tilting. Then came the message I never expected. From Mom, "Please come home. I need to tell you something I should have said years ago." I didn't answer her message right away. I let it sit on the screen while I drove to the lake in silence, the tires of the old truck crunching against gravel. When I finally stopped, the water was still. So still, it felt like the world was holding its breath. I didn't go to the house that night. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop on the hood of the truck and started the next phase. If freezing their money rattled them, what I was about to do next would shatter them. For years, they'd treated me like a ghost, so I became one. An invisible storm moving through their empire, tearing out every rotten beam they'd built their lives on. The first step was the press. Camille had tried to use my past against me, so I sent a different story, a true one, to the same reporters who'd smeared me. A package of documents, photos, and files. No commentary. No speeches. Just proof. Proof of forged documents. Proof of financial fraud. Proof of a family built on manipulation. The next morning, the headlines changed. New evidence emerges in Walsh estate scandal. Forged documents under federal investigation. Sources confirm Walsh heirs under IRS scrutiny after petition filed by eldest daughter. I didn't smile when I read them. I just poured myself a cup of coffee and kept working. Then came the face-to-face. It was 3 days after the codicil fell apart. The courthouse was quieter this time, but the tension was so thick you could taste it. I walked in wearing the same black coat I'd worn to every hearing. Marissa called it battle armor. Camille was already there, her posture rigid, her eyes on me the moment I stepped through the door. The judge listened as Marissa presented the latest findings: wire transfers, metadata, GPS logs, and finally, the original untouched will. Camille's lawyer objected so many times the judge's voice turned sharp. "You may sit down," he said, and the room went silent. Then it was my turn. I stepped up to the witness stand. The lawyer asked me, "Why are you doing this, Ms. Walsh? Is it revenge?" I looked straight at him. "No," I said, "it's justice." When the judge dismissed us for recess, I walked straight past their table. Camille stood, blocking my way. "You think you've won?" she whispered. "You don't even know what's coming." I met her eyes. "Neither do you." The next step was the office. Not the courthouse, her office. I waited until nightfall, until the streets were empty and the glass walls of her law firm glowed like a beacon. I parked across the street and sat there, watching her silhouette move behind the frosted window. When the federal agents arrived an hour later, she never saw me. I just sat there in the dark, engine off, while they walked inside with boxes and warrant papers. By the time she realized what was happening, the elevator doors had already closed behind them. The next morning, the front page was brutal. Walsh Law Offices raided in ongoing fraud investigation. But even that wasn't the end, because I knew Camille. I knew she wouldn't stop unless I forced her to, so I went to her myself. It was a week later, on a street near the lake. I knew she'd be there. She always ran when she was cornered. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she left a meeting, her coat pulled tight around her shoulders. "Camille," I called. She froze, then turned. "You sent them," she said. Her voice wasn't calm anymore. It was thin, cracked. "No," I said. "You did. When you forged that will, when you erased me, you set this all in motion." Her lips curled into a sneer. "You think this will fix anything? You'll still be nothing. You'll still be alone." I stepped closer. "No, I'll finally be free." For a moment, we just stood there. Two sisters. Years of hate and envy boiling between us. Then she turned on her heel and walked away. And I knew, right then, that she'd already lost. She just didn't know how to admit it. That night, I drafted the last packet. I uploaded it to the DOJ's encrypted system. It contained everything. The files from Linda, the evidence Max had pieced together, every transfer, every falsified signature. And at the very end, one line. Let the truth speak for itself. When the DOJ called to confirm, there was no emotion in my voice. "Thank you," I said. And then I hung up. I'd done everything I could. The rest was out of my hands. It didn't take long for the dominoes to fall. 3 days after I submitted the final packet, the IRS called. They wanted my files, every log, every document, every email Linda had kept hidden. I gave them everything. The next morning, Camille woke up to find every account frozen. Jason's card was declined before lunch. Douglas received a letter from the board demanding he step down. For the first time, silence fell over that house. And then the press came back. This time, the stories weren't about me. Evidence suggests fraudulent manipulation of Walsh estate. Federal probe expands. Original will surfaces. Supports equal distribution. Court orders full review. But the true confrontation happened somewhere much quieter. The porch of the old lake house. Mom had texted me again. "Please come home. I need to say this to your face." I drove there at dusk. The lake was still, silver, as if it hadn't aged at all. She was waiting on the porch, 2 rocking chairs set out like a peace offering. We sat without speaking at first. Then she said, "I saw the hearings." I nodded. Her hands shook as she lifted a glass of lemonade and set it down again. I should have stopped them. Her voice cracked when she told me what I already knew, that she'd chosen peace over truth, that she had let Camille talk her into thinking I didn't need this family. She reached for my shoulder. "I thought you were stronger than all of us." I let her hand rest there, but I said what I'd been carrying for years. "Being strong doesn't mean I deserved what you let happen." For a long time, neither of us spoke. And in that silence, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a door cracking open. The next morning, we were back in court. This time, it wasn't about proving my worth. It was about dismantling the lies. Marissa stood and presented the final forensic report. The codicil forged. Tierney's signature fabricated. Linda's testimony confirmed. The judge didn't hesitate. All asset transfers under the previous will are void. The original will, as signed by Frederick Walsh, is reinstated. Further, this court refers evidence of forgery and financial misconduct to federal prosecutors. I didn't look at Camille as the words landed. I didn't need to. I could feel the air go out of her. Jason stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane," he shouted. The judge's gavel came down once. "Sit down, Mr. Walsh." After the hearing, Camille waited for me in the hallway. Her face was pale, her hands trembling just slightly. You think you've won? She said, voice low. You just destroyed this family. I met her eyes. No, you did. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I walked past her and out into the cold Vermont air. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. A week later, Camille's law license was suspended. Jason's name appeared on an international fraud alert list. Douglas disappeared from the public eye entirely. And me? I finally got the one thing I had been fighting for since that day in the study. Not money. Not revenge. Just the truth. The final paperwork arrived by courier. 1/3 of the estate, my legal share. I signed it over to a veteran scholarship fund and a youth shelter. I didn't keep a dollar. When Marissa saw what I'd done, she shook her head. You know, you just walked away from millions? I walked away from them a long time ago, I said. That night, I drove the truck down the winding road by the lake. The glove box rattled with every turn, the photo of Grandpa and me still taped to the inside. I pulled over, killed the engine, and sat on the tailgate watching the water. Autumn leaves drifted down like sparks, the whole sky gold. I whispered into the wind, I did it, Grandpa. And for the first time in years, I felt light. I drove back to the lake house one last time. Not for a fight, not even for closure, just to leave something behind. The porch was empty when I arrived. The same 2 rocking chairs sat there, faint marks on the wood where Mom's feet used to push against the floor. The pitcher of lemonade from last time had left a ring of water on the table, now dried into a pale circle. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching the house like it was a stranger I used to know. Inside the truck, on the passenger seat, sat a sealed envelope. The final court papers, my 1/3 of the estate. I'd already signed it away. It wasn't mine to keep. Not anymore. I walked down to the water. The dock creaked under my boots, the boards warped with age, but still holding. The lake hadn't changed, still silver, still endless, still the one place in this town that felt like it remembered me before everything fell apart. I sat on the edge of the dock and pulled out the photo from the glove box, the one of me and Grandpa with that trout. I traced his hand on my shoulder with my thumb. They thought you left me a joke, I said quietly. But you knew. You knew exactly what I'd do. When I stood, I left the photo on the dock, pressed down with a flat stone. It wasn't goodbye. It was a marker, a place for the truth to stay. The drive away from the lake felt different this time. The engine still coughed like an old man, the mirror still dangled, but every mile between me and that house felt like freedom. At the courthouse, they finalized the new distribution, 1/3 each. Camille didn't show up. Jason sat in silence. Douglas avoided my eyes. For the first time in years, there were no smug smiles, just quiet. I signed my name, not because I wanted their approval, but because I needed the line drawn, clean, final. As I walked out of the courthouse, the October wind cut cold against my face. But for the first time, it didn't feel like it could touch me. The last place I drove to was the veteran shelter on the edge of town. A brick building, paint faded but alive. Kids ran through the hallway while volunteers sorted donated clothes in the back. I handed the envelope to the director. This isn't charity, I said. It's a start. She opened it, eyes widening at the figure inside. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. Use it to build something no one can take away. On the way out, a girl with a backpack too big for her stopped me. She looked at my truck and grinned. It's old, she said. Yeah, I replied, but it runs. Her smile made me think of that 8-year-old in the photo. The one Grandpa had believed in, even when no one else did. The sun was low when I climbed back into the driver's seat. The truck rattled as it started, coughing like it always did. But this time, it sounded like a promise. I drove past the courthouse, past the gates of the estate, past everything that used to hold me down. The mirror swung with every bump in the road, and I let it. Some scars you don't fix. You just learn to live with them. In the glove box, the USB sat beside the photo. I left them there. Not as weapons anymore, but as reminders. As the road opened up, the wind caught the edges of the old military duffel in the back seat, lifting it like it wanted to take flight. I didn't look back. I didn't inherit wealth. I inherited truth. And sometimes that's worth more than all the money in the world. If you've ever had to stand alone against the people who should have protected you, this is your reminder. You can survive it. You can walk away. And you can build something better. Drop a comment below. Type 1 if you believe I did what had to be done. Type 2 if you think justice still has more ground to cover. And if you've ever been betrayed by the ones closest to you, tell me how you found your way forward. Because sometimes sharing the truth is the first step out of the dark,